Hey everyone, welcome back to another CollectA review. Today we'll be taking a look at their new 2020 Standard Edition Roaring Allosaurus. This will be my last review of CollectA's 2020 lineup. I picked up all the figures I was interested in this year, and I was really excited for this Allosaurus when it was first revealed earlier on in the year, but having it in hand, unfortunately this figure did not end up being my favorite. I'll get into the problems I have with this figure a little bit later on in the review. I ended up ordering this figure from Everything Dinosaur. It retails for just around $8, and as with most figures in the CollectA Standard line, they are very easy on the wallet for the quality you get, and I'll leave a link in the description to Everything Dinosaur if you want to order this figure for yourself. So getting back to this little Allosaurus figure, one of the reasons I was so excited for this figure is actually based on the Allosaurus species, Allosaurus jimmadseni, the most famous of which is the specimen of Big Al. And thank you, Spino Dude, for showing me how to pronounce this more elegantly. If I did it in my very brutal New England accent that I try to fight off when I'm trying to do these reviews, I'd be pronouncing it Allosaurus jimmadseni. And speaking of Allosaurus jimmadseni, in the background right here, I have a 1/4 scale replica of the skull of Allosaurus jimmadseni. My uncle actually picked this up for me probably over a decade ago when he visited Dinosaur National Monument, so it's always cool when I can incorporate some of my fossil replica collection into these reviews. So let's just do a couple quick measurements before we take a closer look at this figure. This figure is 7 inches long from the tip of the tail to the tip of the snout and about 3¼ inches tall to the top of the head. Allosaurus jimmadseni is estimated to be about 26 to 29 feet long, a little bit smaller than the most commonly known Allosaurus species, Allosaurus fragilis. So with those measurements, that put this figure somewhere in the 148 to the 150 scale range. Moving on to the pose of this figure, CollectA tried to do something a little bit different this year with their theropod figures. They released most of their figures this year without bases, the exception being the Standard Edition Baryonyx, and they pulled it off okay. Yes, they have gone back and re-released some theropods without bases, but this year they seem to be really going hard without including bases on their theropods, and it's been met with mixed results. Now, the downside of having a theropod figure standing bipedal without a base is most of the time you have to enlarge the feet to help with the stability on this figure. So the feet on this Allosaurus are a little bit oversized. I know some people have been having some stability issues with this figure. Mine, I just have to place it down just perfectly and not touch it, and it will stand fine. But even just the tiniest little touch, it will fall over. I know some people have gotten their figures in with slightly warped feet, and you have to do that hot and cold treatment to get the figure to stand correctly. So I kind of wish bases do come back, because even though this is, CollectA's first main attempt at creating bipedal theropod figures, it's an okay attempt, but I much prefer the accurately sized feet, and bases personally do not bother me at all. But maybe in the future they can refine their sculpting process to make the feet a little bit more proportional to the bodies and still pull off standing on 2 legs. So I guess in the future time will tell. Moving on to the color scheme of this figure, this is another problem I have with this figure. The color scheme is almost identical to the hunting Moposaurus figure that got released alongside this figure. It's very dull and bland. It's just a couple shades of green, and you have just a little bit of red for the crest on top of his head, and that's pretty much it. It's a very bland looking figure, and I kind of wish they gave it a little bit more vibrant color scheme to differentiate it from the color scheme on the Moposaurus. So let's pull this figure in and take a close look at the finer details, starting with the head. The head sculpt is really great on this figure. It's very reminiscent of the species it's based on, Allosaurus jimmadseni, and the biggest difference between jimmadseni and the more common fragilis is jimmadseni had a longer and lower skull. The details on the head are really well done. You have some nice scale size variation sculpted in. The nostril is clearly sculpted in right there. Just like most of CollectA's figures, the eye is painted in black, and you can see the ear canal is sculpted in right there. You got a little bit of red paint on the crest along the Allosaurus head, and the teeth are sculpted and painted okay. I mean, they look a little bit sloppy to me, but this is a small figure, and you kind of see some of this paint detail on similar size Safari Limited figures. The mouth details are painted in bright pink. It's just a matte color. I always wish someday that CollectA would do a gloss coat inside the mouth to give it that wet look, but it doesn't really bother me too much. And they have a nice row of spikes that start at the top of the head that go all the way down to the tip of the tail, going to the body. The body is very well textured. You have a lot of nice scale detail. It feels very nice in hand, very tactile feel when you run your fingers over it. You have some large osteoderm spread in there among those smaller scales. The thumb claw is enlarged like it should be on Allosaurus, and just pushing your finger up against it, it does have a slightly sharp feel. I know one of my biggest complaints on the Safari Limited Allosaurus was that they blunted the claws, but they actually contacted me and told me the reason they did that was because the figures are more mostly meant for kids, and it's a safety issue. But I'm glad CollectA kept the thumb claw kind of sharp feeling. The arms are well sculpted with some nice muscle detail, and then going down to the legs are a little thin looking for me. One of my biggest complaints about CollectA with their theropod figures is when you get past the knee, the legs are very thin and stick-like looking. I really want them to beef up these calf muscles in the future on their figures. I think it'll look much more aesthetically pleasing. And a close-up of the feet. You can see the toe claws are painted in a light gray color, and then zoomed in like this, you can see the feet are a little bit oversized. And now turn the figure over. This is my other big complaint on this figure. The trademark copyright material, the stamp on the bottom of this figure is very large and obnoxious looking, like it actually interferes with the sculpt. You just have all this sticking out right at the chest area, and pretty much any way you look at it, it is in the way. But this is the trade-off of not having a base. Normally this stuff would be printed on the bottom of the base and you'll never see it, but if they're going to do bipedal figures, you're going to see the trademark material printed somewhere on the body. I kind of feel like they could have probably shrunk it down a little bit, especially right here between the arms. That is just absolutely brutal and obnoxious looking. So hopefully CollectA listens to fans and shrink down the size of this trademark stamp, because you can literally see it from every single angle on this figure, and it really takes away from the sculpt. And now moving down to the underside, you have the typical trademark dirty cloaca from CollectA, and you have some more nice scale detail running down the rest of the figures. So all in all, it's a decently sculpted figure. I mean, you can't really ask for much more from an $8 figure, but this figure really did not live up to my expectations. Alright, let's move on with some comparisons. First up is the Papo Allosaurus, which is still among one of my favorite Allosaurus figures, even though it's not the most accurate. And next up is the Namu Studios Allosaurus, which is a fantastic model if you got the cash for it. And lastly, here it is with the excellent Safari Limited Allosaurus, and this is pretty much the most accurate Allosaurus in my mind on the market. I love how fleshed out and bulky it looks. It makes this one looks almost anorexic. And next up, can't do an Allosaurus comparison without comparing it to a Stegosaurus. This is the Safari Limited Stegosaurus that came out last year, and these two kind of scale with each other's Allosaurus, a little bit small next to the Stegosaurus, but Allosaurus jimmadseni is smaller than Fragilis. And next up are some other late Jurassic theropods from North America. Here it is with the deluxe Ceratosaurus, and here it is with the deluxe Torvosaurus. And I have pretty good hunch that next year we'll probably be getting a deluxe version of this Allosaurus. It will remain to be seen if they will include it on the base, but if they do make a larger version, I hope it has a much better paint scheme. And lastly, here it is with the rest of the 2020 figures that I picked up and reviewed on the channel. One thing with CollectA, they always give us a great variety every year with their line, and this year was no exception. So since I have all the figures out like this, let me rank them from my favorite to least favorite. Number one is the Brontosaurus. I'm always partial to sauropods, and this is a brand new species I don't think a figure has been made of yet, and CollectA is always super fast giving us figures of new species. Number two would be the Fukisaurus, because I think ornithopods are woefully underrepresented by dinosaur toy companies, and this is a great ornithopod. Number three would be the Sultrio Venator, followed by the Microraptor, the Deluxe Protoceratops, the Baryonyx, then followed by the Mapusaurus, which, like I said, has a very, very similar bland color scheme like the Allosaurus. And coming up last, which shouldn't be a surprise, is the Allosaurus. Now, that does not mean it's a bad figure. It's just my least favorite of the set of figures I picked up. If it had a better color scheme, I probably would rank it a little bit higher. At least a more vibrant color scheme would distract me from its stick legs and oversized feet. So, final thoughts on this figure. If you can't already tell, I am kind of disappointed in it. I had really high hopes for it when it was shown off earlier in the year, but having it in hand, it did not live up to my expectations. It has a really bland and boring color scheme. That trademark underneath the belly is really, really distracting, and it has those thick legs and oversized feet. And yes, I understand the oversized feet are a trade-off to have a bipedal figure, but if that's what we're going to get going forward, bring back the bases. I'd rather have the bases and the much more proportionate feet than this. So if you're looking to add an Allosaurus to your collection, there are much better options out there. But if you want to have some species variety among your Allosaurus collection, definitely pick this figure up, since this figure represents Allosaurus jimmadseni, and it's only $8, so it's not like it's going to break the bank and you're going to have this big disappointment of a figure. It's definitely worth picking up if you want a little bit of theropod species variety in your collection. And like I said at the beginning of the review, I got this figure from Everything Dinosaur. Link is in the description if you want to order this figure for yourself. So let me know in the comments what is your favorite figure from CollectA this year. And also, if you picked up this Allosaurus, what are your thoughts on it? Are you happy with it, or are you slightly disappointed in it like I am? So that will do it for the review. I know I said at the beginning of the video that this is the last of the 2020 CollectA figures I will be reviewing. But as always on this channel, if there's a downtime between new releases, I always go back and review all the figures. So expect a couple more reviews of all the CollectA figures on the channel before the end of the year. And as always, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, show your support by hitting that subscription button just below the video. Each subscription helps out the channel tremendously, and it's greatly appreciated. And I'll see you guys for the next one.